Today, we're going to be talking about grant funding mechanisms. We're going to cover grant funding opportunities, understanding your sponsors. I'm going to show you different resources for finding funding. We'll talk about proposal submission types. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to grants.gov and also a brief introduction to SF 424 application forms. As you know, there are many sponsor types. Here at Tulane, we deal mostly with U.S. federal government agencies, but we also receive funding from foundations, corporations, especially pharmaceutical companies, professional societies like the International Society for Infectious Diseases, and also voluntary health agencies like the American Heart Association. This is a chart showing that there is $88 billion, again, $88 billion that can be provided through the sponsors that I just spoke to you about. So it's a huge enterprise. There is a lot of funding out there in the world that we might be able to tap into, that we might be able to apply for research grants, for training grants, for travel grants, conferences, fellowships, etc. So there is a program that we use that collects all that information, and they provide this chart showing just exactly how much money is out there for us to try to get and to bring into our institutions to do the things that I just mentioned, research and training and fellowships and other kinds of awards. So I've done this presentation many, many times over the years, and I want to make sure that I think it's important that everyone understand the sponsors that you are applying to. It's important before you do a proposal, before you even start talking to anyone, make sure you understand the sponsor. What is their mission? Are their interests? You can always look with the U.S. federal agencies. They are required to announce any kinds of awards that they have made in the past. And that is one way for you to also see if your project is a good fit with a particular sponsor. There are also private sponsors and companies and foundations that also announce this kind of information. It's another important tool for you as you begin to look for a sponsor that fits your needs. And the other thing that I always stress to applicants, whether it's an institution or an individual applying for a fellowship or a career award, always make sure that your organization is eligible to apply. That's very important for foreign-based entities in particular. And also make sure that as an individual that you are also eligible to apply for certain fellowships or career awards and things like that. So we'll get into that a little bit more. I want to start with some of the agencies, the sponsors that you are familiar with, but I want to make sure that you all know where to go to look for information, and to make sure that you know how to navigate the NIH grant funding enterprise. I do want to say that I don't know if you are following what is going on with the current president, Donald Trump, and his administration. There are a lot of challenges with universities right now and other grantee organizations because they are looking at ways to cut funding. So what I'm telling you today throughout this presentation is what I'm used to historically. I'm used to certain funding mechanisms. I'm used to there being funding available to apply for. That might change later today, it might change next week, or it might change in a couple of years. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that this is business as what I'm describing to you today is what we normally face and what we normally do. I just want to make sure you understand that all that could change depending on what happens. So here is the main website for NIH. And as you know, they are the main funder of health research, probably in the world. Note that there is a version of this page in Spanish. I would be interested in knowing, because I looked at it yesterday. I do not speak Spanish, as you know. I don't know if the Spanish version has anything about grants and funding. But that's what we're going to pay attention to today, is the grants and funding. However, as I mentioned to you, you need to understand when you're dealing with NIH, you need to know what institute within NIH you would be working with or where you would be seeking funding from. For example, there's the National Cancer Institute. There's the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. There's the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. All of these institutes comprise the total NIH. And again, if you are an investigator or you are looking for funding opportunities for your investigators, you want to be familiar with those institutes to make sure that you are applying to the correct place. So let's look at this link here. If you were to hit this link when you are visiting this website, it's going to take you to grants.nih.gov. You're going to find funding opportunities. Sorry, hold on a second. You're going to find funding opportunities, information about the grants process, information about grants policy and compliance, and then there's other information here. Pay attention to the little blocks of information because there's really always a link to some really valuable information. For example, if you've never applied to NIH before, you want to follow this link. If you want to find out about the grants process, when you submit a proposal, who does it get reviewed to? Who does it get reviewed by? What is the peer review process like? What is the award process like? What is the closeout of an award process like? All of that information is on this site. If you are getting NIH funds, and I know that you do get NIH funds, you need to be very, very familiar and know your way around this particular website to understand all that it takes to receive an NIH grant, manage an NIH grant, close out an NIH grant. All of that information can be found in these links. So again, I want to find out, because the purpose today is I want to show you how to find some funding. And if you were to follow this funding link, it would take you to a page that looks like this. I just mentioned to you on the previous section, look for these little blocks of information that are scattered throughout the pages. Here is an interesting little block that this is the first time I've seen it when I put this presentation together. It says, find a fit for your research. So it's a section of NIH where you can go and describe the research you want to conduct, and it will match you with institutes that might be relevant to your particular project. So that's a nice little feature. The other important feature is here a subscription service. Always look for ways to connect to the federal agencies. You can subscribe getting email sent to you. You can subscribe to Facebook and LinkedIn, all kinds of information. And that is the way to do that here with NIH regarding their funding. Obviously, this is a list now that I'm showing you of funding opportunities. I did not put in any kind of keyword searches. And I didn't look by like the National Cancer Institute. This is simply the page that you land on when you open this page. Note that you can do an advanced search. Note that you can export your results, or you can share your results, and you can save your results. So when you're looking at these, the list of opportunities, you'll see the title, you'll see the funding opportunity notice number. And this is the organization, the institute within NIH that is issuing this particular funding opportunity. In this case, it's the National Institute of Drug Abuse. But there are other institutes within NIH that are also interested in this, and they will participate, like the National Institute of Mental Health, for example. And then these are the dates, the expiration date of this notice. And then the final column shows the type of award that would result. You might be aware of R01s, R21s, all the different categories of an NIH award. It's going to show what different categories are here. So I'm going to follow one of these links so you can see if you were to follow this particular link or any of these other links, it's going to take you to the actual notice of funding opportunity. And this is very typical of a notice coming out of the National Institutes of Health. You can see all of the institutes within NIH that are interested in this particular opportunity. I pulled this up because it looked like it was interesting for you in Argentina at IX. But anyway, I wanted to make sure that you are familiar with what the funding opportunity, the first page of the funding opportunity looks like. And we'll see a little more of this in a moment. But it's going to be important for you, of course, to read this entire document. You need to find out, for example, what it's all about. Here is another excerpt. The announcement will explain the type of research that they want to be conducted under this particular program. Some of the funding announcements will say, this is what we want to see. We are interested in this. And they'll also have a section that says, we are not interested in this, so don't send an application if it falls under these categories. But this is something that you would want to concentrate on. What is this project about? What do they expect to see in a proposal? What do they want to see? It's very important for you to know that before you start applying. Okay, so now that's, like I said, a very basic overview. Of the funding opportunity. I want to turn to another tool that will help you find NIH related funding opportunities, and that is NIH Reporter. This is the website for NIH Reporter. It's another tool that you can use to see if NIH is funding projects in your area or your investigator's area of research. It's also a very useful tool to find collaborators who have already received funding from NIH. Because as you know, the more collaborators you have, the more collaborations will lead to additional funding for you. And that's what we want to achieve. We want to continue to try to bring in funding and collaborations with other entities around the world will help with that. NIH also has very nice, the NIH Reporter also has very nice charts. I'll show you a couple of examples of that. And then note here for you and for your investigators, if they are not familiar with this site, they can search publications also. Again, it's another way of finding out. These are the resulting publications from research that has been conducted using NIH money, and it's another way of finding collaborations, and it's another way of finding out if your particular interests, if your research interests are something that would be of value to NIH, something that they would be interested in funding. Again, it's really, really important to understand some of these tools that are available. I called up, just so you can see what this looks like. I asked for, excuse me, let me go back one more time. I put an arrow here because there's a quick search mechanism, but I don't like the quick search mechanism. I like using the advanced search where you can really refine the kinds of information that you're looking for. And so I put in, let's look for awards made to Tulane University in 2024. And so what this is telling me is that several awards have been made. These are the titles. This is the principal investigator. This happens to show that it is in year 10 of the NIH award. And you can see that it comes from NIAAA, which is alcohol abuse. I'm sorry, I forget the acronym for NIAAA at the moment, and you can see also the funding that Tulane has received for this particular grant for this year. One of the other features is this column that shows similar projects. If you were to land on this page after you do your search and you want to look for similar projects and you hit this link, it's going to show you similar projects that have been funded around the world by NIH. Again, another way of you connecting the dots for your investigators, or investigators connecting the dots of, where is my project fit? Who could be a potential collaborator? Is this something of interest? Again, an important tool for you to use. If you were to go, you can click on any one of these, and you will get information about the proposal, a lot more details. You can see the abstract. If you're familiar with submitting NIH grants, you know that you have to have an abstract. You have to be able to show the relevance of your project to public health. You'll see more details about the funding amounts. And then there's other information that you will see. But there's a lot of good information, again, that will be useful to you as you are thinking about a proposal or preparing a proposal. Let me think. There's tables here also. You can look for publications. You can look for patents that may have come out of any of the research that is being done. And you can look for clinical studies if there are any that are being conducted at Tulane. You can export this information and you can share this information. You can also set up your own account with this, with NIH Reporter, and you can start to save information that you can go and look at again and again and again. The other tool that I like, using the advanced search, I looked to see, I put in, I said, show me all the NIH funding in all the countries in South America. And I was able to pull out a map. And it's just another interesting feature. But I also think it's going to be interesting for you as you build your community of practice and you start to look at the tools that are available to you. Some of these features may be very, very helpful. Here again is another chart in NIH Reporter. I said, well, let's see which country is bringing in the most NIH funds. And you can see Peru is the highest, but Argentina ranks second. And then I said, okay, tell me the organizations in South America that are receiving federal funding. And we see a familiar institution here ranks number 5 in the organizations that receive funding from the National Institutes of Health. So that's a lot of information about NIH, but I think for me and for your institution and for many, it is the largest funder at Tulane University. And like I say, it's a lot of good information. I think NIH does a very good job about organizing their web pages, organizing their grant announcement, organizing this kind of data. So I don't think that is very, not all federal agencies in the United States are as organized as NIH in terms of the information that is available to the public and what we can get from it. So, all right, so that's the end of the part of NIH. Now I want to turn to another program. It's called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, CDMRP. I wish they had a different name because I think it's difficult to remember. But the reason that I wanted to bring this to your attention is because foreign entities have the ability to apply for these funds. The funds are set aside by the United States Congress. So our congressmen and our senators, they hear from their public about the kind of diseases that the public is worried about and where they want more research dollars to be devoted to trying to find cures for these diseases. The United States Congress chose the United States Army to administer this big pot of funds. It's about $7 billion of funding annually. The CDMRP is the second largest funder for breast, ovarian, and prostate cancers. And they are known for funding high-risk and groundbreaking innovative research. They have different types of programs like career programs, research grants, basic research grants, clinical trial awards. So they have a lot of different types of grants that you can receive. And the reason that Tulane faculty like applying to this agency is because you don't often have to have preliminary data to prove that you've already done some work on this and it's something that might be of value to the sponsor. This particular CDMRP is willing to take a risk if there is no preliminary data. But if the project is novel, if it looks like it's groundbreaking, it looks like it might be very, very innovative, they will take a risk and fund that project. And we've been lucky to have received funding from them a couple of times now. Okay, here is the website for this program. I've listed on the left-hand side here. These are all of the areas of research that CDMRP will fund. Again, looking at the home page here for CDMRP, you're going to find a section on funding opportunities, a section on the research programs that they have in place. And again, you can also here in CDMRP, you can search awards that have been made and publications that have resulted from those awards. And it's again, tools that you can use to see if there's any kinds of connections you can make, any kind of collaborations you can make, and also to see if your particular project might fit any of these programs. Notice that you can subscribe to their programs with Facebook, X, etc. And let me think of what else I can show you here. I think that's it, but I think it's worthwhile for you to explore this if IX or any of the collaborators with IX or any of the members of the community of practice that you're going to grow are doing any research in these particular areas. And I just wanted to make sure that I pulled this out from the eligibility requirements for CDMRP funding just to show that applications will be accepted by foreign entities. So I think this has, potential for you and potential for others in your community of practice. I'm going to show you the National Science Foundation just briefly. This is another U.S. federal agency that supports research and education across fields of science and engineering. They do not do health research. But I wanted to show you this again. You might still find opportunities if you're doing any kind of work in artificial intelligence related to health. Sometimes you might be able to get, you would have to collaborate with a U.S. institution to get funding through this. But anyway, these are the areas, the directorates. Instead of institutes like NIH has, the National Science Foundation has directorates. And you would have to go into each of these directorates to see what is their mission and what are their interests and what they have funded in the past. Let's see. You can see the link to finding funding and applications. And they also like to organize their funding along lines for undergraduate students, graduate students, postdocs, etc., or general research funding. So NSF will not make awards directly to a foreign-based organization. However, they will consider allowing a foreign-based organization to be part of a project that is based in the United States. And actually, we've had a lot of experience with that at Tulane, where we have an entity that we work with in another country, and we've been allowed to fund them through a sub-award. So there is that possibility. And again, I don't know, I'm not sure if IX is a good fit for the National Science Foundation, but I wanted to look down the road as you start to build your connections in the community of practice, because they might be doing research, for example, in the geosciences area, where they could connect with U.S. institutions for collaborations and getting funding. And here is a list of other government sponsors right now. The Centers for Disease Control, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, and some of the other branches of the Defense Department in the United States will fund health research. And they will also, some of them will fund foreign-based entities. So that is something that you should think about exploring. And throughout all of this, whenever you are working with the US government funding agencies, you need to encourage your colleagues, you need to encourage investigators that you're working with to make sure that they are reaching out to the program officers in those agencies whenever they have any questions. These are individuals that, they are working for the good of the public, so they are supposed to be responsive to people who are interested in getting grant funding and answering questions and talking about the science and the research plans. So do not hesitate. Please do not hesitate trying to reach out to some of the program officers if you ever have any questions. If your faculty or if your investigators have any questions about whether or not an agency would be interested in this particular research, it's important for that conversation to take place. All right. So there are also, of course, as I mentioned, non-US government sponsors. I already mentioned voluntary health agencies, like the American Heart Association is one that Tulane gets funding from. There's also the National Kidney Foundation and American Cancer Society. So there may be international societies that are health related that also might have opportunities for you. There's also professional societies. I mentioned one earlier, but there's also, for example, the International Society of Nephrology. They may have funding that could support a postdoc or support travel, for example. And then foundations like the Gates Foundation or the Tinker Foundation. Some of these will make awards to foreign-based organizations. Some of them will not, but again, it's another way of making those connections to see if you can have some collaborations. And then don't forget the big corporations, including the pharmaceutical companies. I looked up Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, for example. This is their website, funding global health through grants. Again, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, huge multinational corporation. So do not forget that they also, some of the big companies, set aside funding that they use to give grants to entities, and there might be some opportunities for you there as well. All right, next I want to turn to, I've shown you like individual institutes, like the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the CDMRP. If you don't know to go there, there's also other resources that can help you focus and land in the areas and the sponsors that might support your project. So I want to talk about some of these. And the first one that I want to talk about is grants.gov. Again, this is focused on the United States federal funding. This was established in 2007. And in 2007, all the US federal agencies have to post their funding opportunities on the grants.gov website. Grants.gov is also the mechanism that we use to download application packages, complete application packages, and then submit them back through grants.gov. So it serves a couple of purposes. Again, listing the funding opportunities, providing the application that has to be used, and then it is the mechanism. It is the doorway to submitting a proposal to one of the US federal government agencies, except for the National Science Foundation. So the National Science Foundation was the first agency in the late 90s or 1990s. They were the first organization to have online proposal submission. They do not really participate in grants.gov. They can, but you might find their funding opportunities, but it's not a good place to submit a proposal if you are going to the National Science Foundation. But since you can't apply as a federal and as a foreign-based entity, you don't have to worry about that. So, okay, getting back to grants.gov. There's a couple of things I want to point out. You can learn about grants here. You can search for grants, which is what we're going to look at in a moment. Lots of information if you are an applicant. System to system means those are for organizations that have a software platform where the proposal goes directly from the grantee organization directly into grants.gov using some special software. Tulane has one of those. The connect button here is going to be important for you if you're going to use grants.gov to help people find funding. Again, thinking outside of IX and thinking about the community of practice. This is going to be important. This is where you can set up connections to subscription services, getting email sent to you about funding opportunities in your particular area of interest, social media connections, etc. And remember that if you are in grants.gov, the only kind of funding you're going to find is United States federal government sponsors. You're not going to find anything from foundations or corporations or anything in this particular system. So please keep that in mind. Again, as you explore grants.gov, they have all kinds of really good tools for you to take advantage of. Here's a couple of them: grant writing basics, introduction to applying in grants.gov. So look for these opportunities, these learning opportunities as you go through and familiarize yourself with this particular website. Okay, on the funding area under grants.gov, I did a search. This was last year that I did this search on coastal restoration. That's what I put in that search term, and I received 277 funding opportunities that were posted. And there's also forecasting. They know that down the road, in the future, they're going to put in a funding opportunity, and they've notified grants.gov that this is coming. So that's what they mean by forecasted. If you were to open this page when you're exploring this, you have a way of refining the information. You'll see a column on the left-hand side. You could just look for grants. You could just look for cooperative agreements. You can look for who is eligible. You could look for specific federal agencies. So my point is that there's ways of refining this list so you don't have to look through 300 opportunities to see if there's a good fit. Let's see what else I can tell you. So then you would just simply go to follow one of these links, and it will take you to the funding opportunity announcement, and that will also help you link up to the actual application, the SF-424, that would have to be completed if that indeed is the opportunity that you want to apply for. Now, there are other resources for finding funding that I wanted to provide to you. Some of these can be expensive, but some of them are free. But I wanted to make sure that you had these kinds of tools available to you, and the links. Some of them have 2-week trial periods where you might be able to gain a lot of information. Grant Gopher, I've never seen this. I got this from the Tulane University Library. I work closely with them on funding opportunities and other areas. And I asked them if they had some suggestions for you for this presentation. And this is what they came up with. I've never seen Grant Gopher, but it's $9 a month. Instrument L has a free trial period, but it also is expensive. Grant Forward is good. We used to subscribe to that. And Pivot is something that Tulane now subscribes to. And then there's something called Grant Station, which a membership is $200. This is the Pivot that I just mentioned. This Tulane subscribes to this. Now, I understand I went and read some of the materials again with Pivot, and based on the volume of your entity, the annual membership fees are based on the size, the number of grants that you have. So I was thinking that maybe if you have your community of practice, maybe you can pool together, but that would be something that you would need to talk to Pivot about. But this is an excellent tool that we use. The faculty at Tulane University have profiles in this system. And once they put their profiles into the system looks at their publications and their current grants and their other interests. And the system itself starts to look for funding opportunities from all sources: federal, corporations, foundations, state institutions, all around the world. And they start to send opportunities to the faculty to see if there's a good match for funding, for them to receive funding and to apply for funding. Excuse me. Grant Forward is something that Tulane used to be subscribed to. This is also excellent. It has thousands of funding opportunities from all over the world, federal sponsors, foundations. They have a free trial period that you might want to look at. And I believe that they also, if you get in touch with Grant Forward after you've looked at the free trial, I think the costs are also, again, based on your institution, your entity's size. So this might be something that you want to think about and explore and possibly invest in. All right, so the other topics that Gigi asked me to cover today are proposal submission types. By now, I've given you many, many different opportunities to find a program that you want to apply for. And very simply, there's a couple of typical grant terminology that is used by the federal agencies and some foundations about the types of proposal submissions. So, for example, the first time ever that you submit a proposal to any agencies, it's considered new. It's like the initial request for funding. Think about it as year one. A non-competing continuation, those would be, for example, on an NIH award. NIH makes awards for 4 or 5 years at a time. So you receive the new award for year one, and then you have to apply for the subsequent years, years 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. But the difference in applying for years 2, 3, 4, and 5 is that the proposals and do not have to go through a competitive review. Basically, years 2, 3, 4, and 5, you are submitting a progress report. What did you do in year 1? And as soon as you submit that, that's when they release the continuation award to your entity. A renewal, again, I mentioned examples of NIH making an initial award for years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you want to get funding for years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you have to submit what's called a renewal proposal. That's a competitive renewal. Again, it has to go through the peer review process at NIH or other sponsors. And it could be accepted. It could be accepted for funding, but it also could be rejected. If a proposal is rejected, there is something called a resubmission. For the National Institutes of Health, you have an opportunity to submit one resubmission, either for a new proposal or a renewal proposal. If they did not get good reviews, you have an opportunity to submit this resubmission and address some of the concerns of the review committee. It goes through the whole process again. And sometimes the corrections that you make and if you address the comments and the concerns, sometimes it results in an award, but also sometimes it still gets rejected. So those are some of the most common terms used for the proposal submissions. And you can see on the SF 424 application forms, I'll show you again where that comes up about those submission types. All right, so once with the federal agencies, you have decided that you want to apply for this opportunity. You want to make sure you're reading this entire opportunity. Again, you're checking for deadlines, you're checking for award amounts, you're checking for eligibility to make sure that you are eligible to apply. This is information that is contained on NIH funding opportunity notices. Here again are the deadlines. It's going to show you the steps of the reviews. It's going to show you the earliest start date. But then you need to figure out how do I start the application process? With NIH, there are 3 options. The first is using NIH Assist. And when you're looking at this funding opportunity announcement, you're going to see this green button. If you press the green button, it's going to take you into the Assist program to help you start compiling and putting together your proposal. There's also the opportunity of system to system. I mentioned that Tulane uses the Cayuse software platform, and it saves a lot of information that goes into the application form, typical information that is always repeated with every application. And it goes directly from Tulane into the grants.gov system. And because we have this system set up, there are fewer errors and warnings that we receive when we submit the proposals. The third option is to use this link here, that use the grants.gov system called Workspace. And you can use Workspace to get the application, fill out all the forms, and submit to grants.gov. So, let me see what else. This is what you're going to encounter. This is the first page of the SF 424 form. This is an old one. It's already expired, but as you can see, the yellow boxes are fields that you have to complete. Notice that there's a type of application: new, continuation, revision. That's if you're revising a proposal that did not have, that had errors, and you have to resubmit it in time for the deadline. NIH has done a very nice job here. This is the same form, although this is for Forms I series, which is starting in a couple of months. And NIH has taken this form and annotated it to make sure that you are completing these fields correctly. Again, they do this because it reduces the number of errors when you submit your forms through the grants.gov system. At Tulane, before we used our Cayuse platform, we had taken these forms and annotated them the same way that NIH has done here, only we put in things that are typical for Tulane University, like our legal address, our legal name, the name of the signing official, all the kinds of things that are very typical and are repeated with every application that goes into the federal government. Notice down here, the type of applications, again, those things come up: the new, renewal, continuation, or resubmission. So those boxes come up on this form as well. So you're going to encounter that through the life of any kind of grant that you have with a U.S. federal agency. And I think that is the end of my presentation. And I'd be very happy to take questions.